Whether it's your first home or your forever home, it's the heart of your celebrations. And at NFM, we want to help you save on every room this season. Shop our huge selection of furniture, appliances, electronics, and flooring. Bring it all together with help from our design experts. With guaranteed low prices and financing options, keep your budget on track. And save time with our pickup and delivery options so that you can make yourself at home where traditions start. Only at NFM.
Releasing the certainties of I have all of the answers to the metaphysical questions of existence. For a Christian, that we're just handed the answers, like right off the bat. It's like we're handed the questions that we're allowed to ask, and then we're handed the answers to those questions, and then an entire framework that supports everything. And there is a portion where it feels like we're not comfortable with mystery anymore, because our brains are supposed to be able to make sense of everything and put all these building blocks of, we actually call it a Christian worldview.
Well, I just stepped out onto my back porch because I just got done editing a really, really interesting conversation with my friend Caleb. And I've known Caleb for a long time. I was his youth pastor back when I didn't know what I was doing. And he was our student worship leader, and he graduated and moved on. And he wound up at one of the Marshill plants as a worship director over there. And his story is one I think that is very important. Caleb ended up landing in a place where he's become kind of leaning on the agnostic, atheistic standpoint, when he used to be a very dedicated Christian, serving as a pastor on staff at a church, giving up his whole life and moving across country to do so. And I share Caleb's story here because I think it's important to remain curious about the human experience and not to write someone off because they no longer are in a camp that we agree with or like, or are the same as us. And Caleb is a good friend of mine, and he's a good human being, and he's very honest intellectually now. And his story is important, and I learned a lot from him on this one, so I hope you do too.
Well, Caleb, welcome to the Liminal Living Podcast. It's good to have you on here. Now, we have been friends for quite some time. I think I met you in 2005 when you were like just starting high school or so. And
yes.
Like you were in, I was a youth pastor and I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And you were in my youth group, and you're a super talented musician. You were one of our worship leaders, the only worship leader we had. We wouldn't have had anything if it weren't for you. And kind of we were at that church together till you graduated, and then off you went. But yeah, we stayed connected, and we've been friends for a long. Now you're like a grown man. So
33,
and now I'm the old man. I'm gonna be 45 this year.
Good grief, dude.
Yeah,
I don't know. Once you hit 30, it feels like all the same to me. But
all the numbers that start with 3 are kind of the same until you get about 39, and you're like, oh my God, it's gonna hit the 4s.
Yeah,
and that's a change.
Oh.
Yeah, and then I'm about to hit the 4-5 marker halfway to my 50s, and that feels a little different than just turning 40, because now I'm like almost to the half-century marker, so that's really interesting.
Dude, you still got 15 years before you can get the senior discount at McDonald's, though.
Okay, so that's good to know. I got 15 years left until I'm a senior citizen.
My dad was pumped about that. He thought it was 50, and then he was really disappointed when he found out it was 60.
Well, dang.
But thanks for having me.
Yeah. Now, our podcast is for those going through a deconstruction or a dark night, and really we just want to capture some stories about the deconstruction process and where it took folks. There really is no like finish line in mind for a lot of deconstruction. So I just want just a variety of different stories. And yours is a really interesting one as well. We reconnected this summer because you moved away, you big jerk.
Yep.
But you came back and visited this summer, and we kind of reconnected. And I thought, man, I really need to have a conversation on our show. So thanks for being here.
Dude, thanks for asking me. This is a conversation that I actually haven't really had yet with too many people. So
yeah,
I think it'll be good to have it with you. You're a great friend, and I think you're a great listener, and I'm excited.
Well, appreciate that. Well, before we get into like where you are, can you tell us like where you came from, just the faith system that you grew up in and what that was like?
Yeah. So pretty classic, like pastor kid story. My grandpas are both pastors. I've got a lot of uncles that are pastors, brothers that are pastors now. And my dad has always been a pastor. So I grew up obviously in the church, more conservative. We were usually like Baptist churches, but not like wear dresses and suits, just like more conservative Bible teaching. Eventually moved into a little bit more of a non-denominational, but and like how I was raised was very conservative. Like I wasn't allowed to watch PG movies unless my parents were there.
PG?
PG
movies, they're dangerous stuff. You never know what's going to be on that Finding Nemo.
Exactly. Well, it does say parental guidance.
So I guess you were guided by a parent through Finding Nemo.
Yeah. And we did find Nemo.
Oh, good. Wow, that's interesting. I haven't heard being PG like taken so literally, but hey.
Oh yeah. Well, most PG-13 movies were just not even like those. Just weren't done. Those weren't watched.
No superhero movies. That's sad.
Yeah, exactly. Also, this is a really big bummer for being a musician. And I say like bummer and stuff. Like I don't want to knock on my parents because they were raised in a more conservative version of what I was raised in. So like obviously they were doing the best that they could and the best that they knew how. But musically, I wasn't allowed to shop for music anywhere other than a Christian bookstore.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So musically, I gravitated towards Reliant K eventually, just because I was like, hey, they're not just singing like worship songs. Mm-hmm. Like there's some clever lyrics here and some really interesting melody lines. So but yeah, I grew up very conservative and had always had the sense that there wasn't really a career or a job for me outside of the church. Just because I was a Christian and I was supposed to be spreading the gospel, and the best way to do that was to work for a church. I gravitated more towards music. So I didn't ever view myself as being like a preaching pastor, but I was like, I would definitely be a worship director. So like, growing up, I just kind of always had that in mind. I'm going to work for a church like my dad. And so like, as the time was coming to go to college, they really wanted me to go to Moody Bible Institute, which is the same place that my two older brothers went. Mm-hmm. And then my brother below me ended up going there as well. But I looked at their music program and it was choir directing.
Yeah.
And I was like, this isn't, I kind of want to be like a rock star for Jesus. Like,
yeah. It's just not your bag.
I don't want to learn I still don't know how to read like music proper. Like I can read, I know what chords are, but I can't read like the clefs and all that stuff. So I kind of said no to that, but then didn't really know what else to do. So I went to community college. Ended up meeting a girl in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, fell in love with her. We got married very quickly, like not even a year after meeting, we were married and lived in Madison. And I started working at Starbucks, and there was somewhere else. There was a smoothie shop for a little while. I was holding like 3 jobs, and eventually I got a part-time job at a non-denominational church in Madison, Wisconsin. So I was there for 2 or 3 years, and I was just like, this is still not quite as rockstar as I want to be. So like I've been listening to Mark Driscoll for a while, and like I was like, I wonder what it would look like to work for his church. So I applied for a job, and I didn't get the job, but I was like, hey, I just really feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. Like, is there anything you can do? So they offered me an unpaid internship, and I took it.
The unpaid intern, man.
Yeah.
And you took it. And so you moved out. What year is this that you're moving out to Seattle area?
I'm so bad with years. They all blur so much. Geez, I don't know.
How far after graduation? How about that question?
Like 4 years after graduation,
Okay.
5 years, somewhere in there.
All
Thanks.
Got to have a marker on the road there.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, 4 or 5 years after graduation, me and my wife moved to Seattle. I start my internship for that church. I do the unpaid intern thing, probably 30 hours a week. I was also working part-time as a construction worker. I do that for almost 2 years. And then the church starts crumbling. So
that was around the whole controversy with Driscoll in the New York Times bestseller list. And
yes, I think that was like the one we were at, because I went and had an interview for a job at the Ballard campus, which like I couldn't have been more stoked about. Like that was, if there was a campus that I could have worked for, that would have been it. So I led worship there 5 times, did several interviews, and they said after the last interview, they're like, we're going to hire you. We're just waiting for the green light. We're pushing for it. And then that green light never came. Instead, it was like, oh, this, there's a lot of things happening now. Marshill's not going to be a thing anymore. So at that point, the church that I was interning at, the worship director that was there felt led to take his family elsewhere. So that left the position at the Marshill church in Everett that I was at, that left that position open. So I took that position, and that church became Foundation Church. And I led worship there and did like the creative arts, a lot of different things, like upkeep around the church. I built like a bunch of wood structures for different sermon things we were going through. I did that for 2 or 3 years, and I would say during the time at Foundation Church was when my faith really started to change, when I started to really reconsider things.
Was there
maybe
like
the Marshill?
Was it because of what was happening at Marshill, or was it just some thoughts creeping in, or like what do you remember, like a trigger moment or a thought or a question or anything?
Yeah, I think for me, like I've always been afraid of death. Like I've always been afraid. Like I remember going into my parents' room, just waking up after nightmares and just like crawling in the bed, like, I don't want to die. I don't want you to die. And then I think also like the idea of hell inserted in there when I was a kid, like made that so much worse, because I was like, if I die, I'm going to hell. Like I don't want to die, and I don't want to go to hell. And I'm not entirely sure that I'm doing everything right. So fast forward now into Foundation, I think that I've just always been in this like afraid of death and hell existential thing. And I think that what happened was the Mars Hill collapsing, and then just seeing like how relationships and people behaved after that. And then in Foundation Church, which isn't a church anymore, seeing how people behaved in that, I think it wasn't the thing that made me be like, oh, maybe God isn't real. It was the thing that made me start to like to even have that thought, like to be like, okay, maybe I'll go down this road a little bit more than I ever have. Because I remember watching like atheist debates and stuff, and just like sitting in my office being terrified because I'm like, everything that you're saying makes so much sense, and I'm like, I can't reconcile this with what I believe. Like, I just don't feel like the facts that I thought were there are there. So I used to always just like shut that stuff off, but I started like digging into it more and actually like trying to come at it from less of a Christian perspective. And I was trying to like, I was in the process of cleaning my slate so that I could start from the beginning.
Cleaning your slate of a belief system. Like, yes, yeah. And you're still a worship pastor at that moment.
Yeah, as I'm starting to clean the slate.
What was that like to be like leading worship on a Sunday and then having like that internal wrestling and questioning, and what was it like?
Oh, it was terrible.
Do you remember? Do you remember like
yeah,
a story of it, like a concrete story of when you're standing up there and like you're singing this song, and then inside you're having this dialogue about that?
Oh yeah, yeah. There definitely started to be a time where I was singing these worship songs, and I'm just like, I don't believe this. Like, I don't believe this at all. And then just feeling like, you know, that weight of guilt and shame of like, you know, at our church, we didn't allow people that weren't Christians to lead worship. And so like, I'm always
like the one in charge of it all.
I'm the one in charge of it all, which I think, honestly, like, this is a little aside, but I think that's what makes it so hard for people in ministry to even start to have these questions, is because there's so, and like, if you have a family, there's so much baggage, because it's like at your career and your family and like everything, that all of your friends, like everything that you have is wrapped up into this belief system. And as soon as you start to question that belief system, you feel very out of place very quickly, because there's a lot of questions that, especially in the more conservative churches, you can't ask without like, okay, this person's in trouble. And like, you know, from a Christian's perspective, I was in trouble. But from my perspective now, I was forming my own belief system for the first time in my life.
Yeah, because there was a lot of expectation that was placed on you with 2 grandfathers and uncles and brothers and even your dad.
Oh yeah,
being a pastor. And so questioning, like having questions around the faith, questioning it is going to be like putting relationships very close to you then in jeopardy, and then your career and your community and your friends and your entire future is based on like sticking to this thing that was handed to you that you weren't really sure if you ever held on to it. That must have been, I guess, just produced a lot of anxiety inside of you, like, and then you just have to hold that on the inside of you. Like, what did that do? What did that do to your anxiety levels and your physical health and your mental health?
Not good. I became an alcoholic pretty quick. I was drinking like a 5th of whiskey a night for a while there. I started smoking more cigarettes, didn't sleep, like, physically it was awful. In my soul, I was absolutely tormented. And like, there's just so much fear too, because like, you know, I built my whole life around this career, and I think I was 27, 28, 29, somewhere. There wasn't like a specific day that I remember, but at this point I just built so much of my life around it that it was very depressing to even consider this not being what I do with my life, because I didn't really know what else to do.
Yeah.
I had never really considered anything else.
Well, Richard Rohr says that people don't change until it's too painful to remain the same. So when was it that you decided something's got to change, and what did that look like?
Yeah, I think just as because our lead pastor was leaving the church, and I knew that the church was not going to survive him leaving the church. A lot of people thought that maybe it would survive for a little while, but I was like, it's not going to last after he leaves. So I kind of took that as my opportunity to explore like my belief system. So I rode that church out almost to the end. I did quit. I gave a 2-month notice, but I think the church went for maybe like 6 months or something after I left. And at that time I was like, okay, I'm not gonna go to church. I'm not gonna get a job as a worship leader. Like I started working construction full time at that point, and I was like, I'm just gonna wipe everything clean, take this opportunity, and kind of rebuild from there. So I think in my mind I started like questioning and becoming not okay with being a Christian for like maybe a half a year or so before I actually left the church. But I felt like after I left the church, I had like the space, because I was still meeting with people that were like, while I was working at church, people were still meeting with me to talk through their problems. I was still praying with them, and I was like, I don't even like know what I'm praying to. And so, yeah, I felt like I didn't actually get the freedom to like, as I said, figure out my belief system until I was out of there.
Yeah. Now, when you say you like wipe the slate clean, was there a process that you used to do that? Like, is it just looking at one belief, next belief, or was it more just like a reset button that just like cleared everything out? And like, what was that like?
Yeah. I didn't do the whole, like, I'm going to go look at all these other gods and religions. I wiped it clean in that I'm like, I'm just going to pretend, and this is what I believe, that we don't know where we came from. We don't know why we're here, and we don't know where we're going. And honestly, it is very scary. Like it's very scary at first to not have like all of these answers. Because these are the answers that I think these questions are the things that built religion in the first place. Is where do we come from? Why are we here? And where are we going? And so for me, wiping the slate clean just means I don't know. Like I had to get very comfortable with the answer I don't know. And I think it's a really good answer to most of the big questions. Like I like looking at all the different possibilities, like, oh, this is a simulation, or oh, there was a big bang, or like we're just animals basically with a consciousness, and so we have all these things that we do that aren't actually important, but we feel like they are. So like I'm okay with all sorts of different things being like possible and correct. I don't think I'm on this big journey like to find like a deity or something that I can pray to. I'm just kind of in this spot where I don't know. I think that the only thing that we have is this moment and our brain and our friends, and I don't know, it's actually quite a lot, like when you put it into perspective, because it could just be like a ant or something.
Well, I mean, releasing like the certainties of I have all of the answers to the metaphysical questions of existence, like for a Christian that we're just handed the answers, like right off the bat. It's like we're handed the questions that we're allowed to ask, and then we're handed the answers to those questions, and then an entire framework that supports everything. And like we've intellectualized the faith quite a bit. I mean, since I guess the Enlightenment scientific revolution has happened, intellect has become a big thing. But like there is a portion where it feels like we're not comfortable with mystery anymore, because our brains are supposed to be able to make sense of everything and put all these building blocks of, we actually call it a Christian worldview, and the more conservative you get in evangelicals, the more they hold to that Christian worldview where, even God created everything and it only took 6 days and it was literal, and then there's Adam and Eve and we come from there, and like everything is so literal. Like if you go to like that Answers in Genesis ministry with the Creationism Museum, like everything is built on that one assumption that like this Genesis beginning narrative is literal, and then everything from that point on is then taken literal. And it's just really hard to like engage the intellect in that, because you have to put your brain inside of this system of thinking that it works for like an early season in life, but then like when you actually get experience in life and then your faith doesn't reconcile to what you're experiencing, and then you get questions, most people just don't even want to embrace or ask the question. What have you found that is beneficial to asking the hard and dangerous questions that you've had to ask?
What's been beneficial? I think for me it was finding new people like to listen to and read, because all of my self-help up until that point was Christian based. And so, yeah, I think for me, it was realizing that I've spent 29 years in this framework. And it's like, I just kind of had to force myself to listen to other people speak, like Sam Harris, or just, I don't know, other people that aren't Christians. Because at that point, like I said, all I had done was listen to Christians. And also, I don't know, just giving yourself time, like, because like I said, for me, it wasn't like a clean break. Like I wasn't like, oh, like I'm done with God. It was like a very like slow burn. Like it didn't just happen. And I think for me to ask the hard questions, I had to just slowly release anything that I had been holding on to, like, which there's a lot of talking to yourself in that, like trying to, look at your belief system logically rather than like, oh, this is the end all be all. I don't know.
Yeah, it's almost like the Zen concept of beginner's mind, but on like steroids.
Yes,
like
exactly.
I'm going all the way with beginner's mind. I don't know the answers to the basic questions that I had assumptions to right when I started.
Yeah. Oh, and I guess I'll say this now that I'm thinking of it. I think it's also, you need to get yourself okay with being uncomfortable for a little while, because when you have a belief system, that's a very comforting thing. It's like, okay, I have this God I can pray to, and like after I get done praying, he's going to make me feel better. I think for me, it was just dealing with a lot of discomfort in my head. Like I didn't feel comfortable because I didn't have all these answers anymore. And rather than being like, all right, I'm going to go back to these answers that I've always had because I feel uncomfortable, I forced myself to sit in the discomfort of it. But there were also a lot of things that were really nice about leaving the faith. Like I've always been a very anxious person. And one of my biggest beefs with Christianity the whole time that I was in it was like, Jesus promises, he doesn't promise like a whole lot as far as like how we're going to feel on this earth, but he does promise that he'll offer you peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been wanting and longing for this peace my entire Christian walk. And when I finally left the faith, that was the first time that I was like, I actually feel peaceful in my soul. Like I am at peace because like I don't feel like I'm always doing something wrong, or there's something that I should, not every person is raised like this, but I just legitimately believed I was a worthless piece of shit. And like I needed God, like, and to fill this void in my life. And as a Christian, like that still would make sense. But like when you get on the other side of that and realize what that does to your like soul, just feeling like a piece of shit all the time, it really takes a toll on your soul, like even if you're not really noticing it. And for some people it's worse than others, and for me it was detrimental towards my like psyche and well-being. So
that is actually a theology that is held with that terminology you used from Martin Luther. He believed that humans were pieces of dog shit that were covered in snow. That's so direct quote from Martin Luther. You just didn't know it, but that's there. That is an actual concept.
Yeah, and I think the churches I've been in love Martin Luther, so it makes sense that that's how I was feeling.
Now, can I ask like a tougher question?
Yeah.
And this isn't meant to challenge, but I want your understanding around it. Some people might say, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Why didn't you just move to a more progressive form of the faith or a more ancient form? Because some people through deconstruction find themselves in like a more liturgical progressive church, or, they find themselves a different form of a Christian than they were. And you've hit the reset button so radical that went back and says, I'm clearing the slate entirely. Like, what is your thoughts around that? Like, why didn't you end up in a more just progressive Christian camp? And why do you think you ended up in the more agnostic, atheistic camp?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I definitely went back and forth as I was like the church was coming to a close and I wasn't going to be working there. I did go back and forth with attending a church that's more like open-minded, I guess would be the word. But I think that once I finally did start clearing the slate, I did start to look more at like God and the Bible rather than like his followers. And honestly, there are a lot of things in the Bible that I just very much disagree with, like just at like face value, like the flood, Sodom and Gomorrah, like the way that God behaves in the Old Testament. So I guess my answer is just like I decided to weigh whether I thought God was worth pursuing in any sort of way, shape, or form at all, like the God of the Bible. And I concluded that he's not really someone that I would actually want to serve anyway. Like, especially the God of the Old Testament. Like, there's very, very few times that like he's doing what I would expect a loving God to do. And like he says, he's full of wrath. So like I get all the wrathful things that he does because he says that, but to me, there was enough things logically that don't make sense about the God of the Bible that I started looking at like his actions and then decided that those don't like I feel like the church, like more conservative churches, like, and this is maybe unpopular, are doing are preaching what I view that God to be like. And I feel like if you're preaching something other than that, that you're not really delivering the God of the Bible that's being presented in the Bible. Like rather than me trying to, like, I now have this new belief system where I view all people as awesome and everyone's great. No one's a piece of shit. So when I try to like reconcile that with the Bible now, I can't do it. And so like I felt like I was trying to fit God into my belief system rather than letting his belief system be what I believe. Does that make sense? Like I felt like there isn't a version of the God of the Bible that I'll be okay with, I guess. Yeah. What I ultimately got to, and also realized I'm believing, like, a Christian is believing in, or I'm believing in one less God than a Christian. Like there's a lot of gods to not believe in. So yeah, I guess I looked at that idea of trying other churches, but like if I just read the Bible and take it at face value, I'm like, I'm not really interested in this. Like, I don't know.
So there's like, you can't get over like a fatal flaw that you see in the Bible of, you know, the progressive churches are not handling the wrathful God of the Old Testament, and if we're honest, some of Paul's writings, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would that sum up that kind of that statement?
Yeah. Again, this sounds harsh, but like Christianity was invented by that culture, that people group in that time to answer the big life questions. And the Bible is the story that was constructed to answer the big life questions. And I'm just like I just take it at like, that's how I view it now. It was an invention by humans. And like, when I look at it in those eyes, like the God of the Old Testament makes a lot more sense because he looks a lot like all the other mythology that was being written or spoken about at that time. There's a lot of creation stories that look very similar and stuff like that. So I started to feel that it was a human invention. And then from that point, I couldn't really go back into it. Because I was like, there's a lot of other human inventions that I find more beneficial for me, like Taoism or Taoism. Sorry.
Being on the other side of like a firm belief system of the answers, you're saying ended up bringing you that peace that you were like looking for your whole life. What was it about the unknown of those questions that brought peace? Like what was it that finally resolved some inner tension? Because it seems like having unknown brings tension for a lot of people. Like, oh my God, I don't know the answers. Now I'm all freaking out. And the answers are what brings the comfort. And you said, you know, that's what Christians do. We have answers and that brings us comfort. But you found comfort not having answers. And I'm really interested in how you did that. And you know, what was it about not having answers that brought comfort? Because usually that brings anxiety. What can you describe that?
Yeah. I think like for me, the big one has always been dying. Like I don't want to die. I don't want to cease to exist. Like I've always been worried about what's coming next. And so like, I feel like in Christianity, I had that answer, like, oh, I'm going to heaven or I'm going to hell. And my discomfort came from not knowing which one I was going to. And so like, I knew that there was a heaven and a hell or like something. And I was like, I can't, because sometimes I'm like, I'm just believing in this because I'm scared of going to hell. And then I was like, well, that's not a real belief in God or the kind of relationship he's looking for anyway. So I feel like the answers that I had in Christianity were discomforting in and of themselves. And so when I got to this spot where I'm just okay with being like, I don't know where we came from, I don't know where we're going, it's comforting because I don't like, there's no more hustle. Like I don't, and like I could be wrong, which whatever, like, but there's nothing that I'm like striving to figure out, or there's nothing that I'm like trying to please, like on a divine level. Like from my perspective, we're just, I mean, we are apes, but we're apes with a consciousness. And like I feel like our consciousness, the fact that we know, has been the thing that has shut ourselves in the foot this whole time, is because we think that there needs to be some greater, deeper meaning to life. And like, I think the meaning of life is just living, like living and being kind. And so that brought peace to me, because it was like, I don't actually have to, like, there isn't this divine thing that I'm trying to appease. There isn't like a blood sacrifice by someone that was slaughtered for my sins. Just all these things that never really clicked for me or made sense to me. It makes a lot more sense to just be like, we don't have the technology to know where everything came from, and we might not ever. Yeah, I guess also there's a lot of cultures, like we hear this and we think this is weird. There's cultures that will, when they're celebrating the anniversary of like their loved ones' deaths, they'll dig up the bones and they'll bring them in the house and they'll like commune with them. Like they'll eat a meal with them sitting at the table. Like that sounds really weird to us, but they're so comfortable with the idea of death. Like all the kids are experiencing like the celebration and the anniversary of like what life was and what death is now. And they're so comfortable with it because they've been staring at it their whole lives. And, you know, they've gone toe to toe with the idea of death and like realized, okay, yeah, that's going to be really scary, but everything dies. Like that's, we kill things to eat. Like even if you're a vegan, like everything is living energy, and we consume it to live, and then eventually everything dies. And I think there's a lot of us that doesn't want that to be true, and I didn't want it to be true. But like once I was able to embrace that idea of like this is all there is. There isn't an afterlife. Like when I die, I'm dead. I don't know. It makes life, at least for me, it made it more precious. Like it didn't feel like this was just something that I was struggling to get through to the new earth. Like, you know, I'm going to go through, like my parents went through all sorts of financial troubles and hardships. And they would always say like, you know, this is just our lot in life. Like we're going to suffer here. And then when we get to heaven, it's just like, I didn't want that. Like I don't want this to feel like a transition. I want like, if this is all there is, I want to enjoy it for what it actually is. And that brings me comfort.
Yeah, I can see that now. Like instead of waiting to live later, you're saying I'm choosing to live now.
Yes.
And like since that church fell apart and you got into construction, you ended up moving down to Mexico with your wife, and now you're like this indie musician, and you're making some pretty awesome. I love when you send me a new song, you're like, hey, I just mixed this, and it just sounds so cool. It's really
thanks,
good.
man.
So
thank you.
I do see like a comfort to you that I've never experienced when you were like a teenager back in those days. You know, you had a lot of insecurity and anxiety and whatnot, and kind of delving into some of the reasons that might be triggering some of that for you, and how your faith was contributing to the anxieties. I can definitely see that. So how do you feel about death now? Was this big source of fear, and now you're like, if it comes, it comes. Like, is that still something that you wrestle around with in your head that sneaks up on you when you're not expecting it? Like, oh crap, I just thought of death. Like, how do you view it now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm scared of it the same way that, like, anything uncomfortable or nerve-wracking that you do in your life. Like, I hate going to the DMV.
They have those in Mexico?
Yeah. Actually, I'm sure they have some, but we haven't had to re-up our license. Yeah, so I've just existential crisis has always been my thing, which I think is what has pushed me to just, like, I just stare at death. Like, I just stare at it. And in staring at it, like, I realized, like, I know this is going to be scary when it happens. Like, I know that with my last breaths, I'm going to feel like, what the hell is happening? Where am I going to go? Like, I know that that's going to be, like, there's no way to avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that in just sitting in it and looking at it and just coming to terms with the way that I think life is now, trying to let the scariness of that day be reserved for that day. Like, I'm trying to just look at it and understand logically, like, okay, like, I have to die.
Mm-hmm.
Like, unless I get bit by a vampire or something, like, I'm going to die. And I think, like I said, just looking at it and not allowing that fear that I know I'm going to have on that day and that time. Like, there's no reason worrying about it, because then I'm just going to be worrying about it like 4 times as much or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's a great answer, but
that's yours. And that's yours, and it's honest. And I think that matters. What do you hope is true? Like, what do you wish was true, that after you die, if you could make it all up, like, and just like, oh, this would be great if this is actually how it was, what would that look like on the other side of death?
That's a great question. I don't know, because here's the other thing. Like, I don't know why I haven't mentioned this yet. I'm also terrified of having a consciousness forever.
Mm-hmm.
Like that always scared me when I was that was a big source of fear for me when I was a Christian. I was like, I don't want to live forever. Like I don't want to die, but I also don't want to live forever. Like, because maybe 2 million years from now, I might be like just really sick of everything and be like, it'd be great to go to sleep. Just not wake up. Like, it's been 2 million years. I've done it all. So I guess, I don't know. It's, for me, it feels weird to talk about anything after life without sounding like a loony bin. But what I hope happens is that because there is when someone dies, if they're on a scale, there is a measured weight that leaves the body. And I don't just mean their defecation. Like, there's a measurable weight that leaves the body when someone dies, and no one knows what that weight is. And I hope it's how much a consciousness weighs. And I hope that it goes into the multiverse energy fields and reattaches to something else.
That sounds very Marvel.
I don't know.
Like, sounds very Marvel. What there's this story I ran into that is interesting. I don't know what I think about it yet, but it was really interesting. It's about, and I don't even remember what tradition this is from. This is from some faith tradition somewhere, and I can't even remember where I heard it. It was on a podcast somewhere, but there's a story of a man who dies and goes to some blissful state called heaven, and is there for like ever and doing everything that he's ever wanted to do. And finally gets bored of everything and goes up to like whoever the main angel is that's overseeing everything. And he's just like, I'm kind of getting miserable having everything I want the way I want it, forever and ever and ever. Like, when does this change? When does it? And the angel's answer was, oh, you're ready now. Okay, so this door here actually gives up your consciousness. And this was an intermediate state, and you walk through that door and experience like a death fully. And the guy was like, oh, finally. Now, I cannot remember where I heard that, but I had never heard that
That's
terminology before. So he went to some intermediate state, lived there for a long time, and then was like, I'm done, man. Can I just go to sleep forever? And the angel was like, yeah, there's a door for that. So it just sounds like something.
I'll walk through the door.
Yeah, sounds like something that like fits in your paradigm a little bit, maybe, of that hope.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, and also like I think a lot of the after death experiences where people will die and then come back and they'll be like, this is what I experienced. Our brain releases the most powerful hallucinogenic drug on the planet into our brain when we die. And so like everyone when they die effectively goes on the craziest trip that they would have ever been on. And it releases DMT, which is also the chemical that makes us dream at night. And so what I hope is that like, we go into the pool of consciousness and then just different lives recycling. But what I also hope / think happens is that we die, our brain releases a flood of DMT, and then we get one last blissful experience, and then we just never wake up. Alan Watts said, like, if you're feeling scared of what it might be like to die, you don't remember what it was like before you were born, and that wasn't scary. So why should you be scared of what it's like after you're unborn or dead?
Okay, that's interesting. So you're kind of in an in-between place. Would you say that you're in an in-between place? Like you don't have your mind made up of like, these are the metaphysical realities of the world. Like, what is it?
Oh, yeah.
What are the practices that you have embraced that help you live in the in-between of, I used to have something that made sense somewhat. I gave that up. I don't have something that I've fully put together and bought into yet. I'm more of like in a liminal place in between. Like, what are the things that have helped you in that intermediate place?
Mindfulness, meditation, over and over again. Just because I especially have a very, like many people have a very active brain that is very hard to shut off. And I think I have found more enjoyment with doing absolutely nothing in mindful meditation than like pretty much anything else. Just because we're bombarded with all of these ideas and ideations and belief systems constantly, things to buy, things to do, you need this to be happier. Mindfulness meditation brings you to a place of bliss and calm and being completely satisfied with just your breath. And so for me, like, I think I'm trying to figure out how to breathe like comfortably as a human, and trying to let all those extra things that I don't feel like we can actually have answers for, kind of let those on the back burn, and more so focus how to just, because mindfulness is something you practice all the time. Like my mind is always wandering. And I love to think about these big questions. Like maybe we were created by AI to better understand the real world, or like, stupid stuff. Like I love thinking about all that, but I found a lot more enjoyment like doing the dishes or going for a walk if I'm just actually focusing on doing the dishes or going for a walk. Like our minds can just go. And I think that it's a good thing, but also you'll miss out. I was missing out on a lot of like what was actually happening in my life because I was spending so much time in my head. And I still do that, but for me, that's kind of been the thing, is just I am me in this body. I have a heart and lungs, and I'm breathing, and I can see all these things, and just trying to find absolute satisfaction and enjoyment from like what miracle life actually is. Like without a God or a deity, like if you just take that possibility off the table and just be like, whoa, I'm here and I can see and I can breathe and I can go for a walk and I can go like buy a beer or like whatever. It's actually quite miraculous. And the odds of me, specifically my DNA, my brain, my consciousness existing are very, 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 very low. And so like just the fact that I'm here talking to you, another person who had very low odds of existing, it's just life in and of itself is a miracle. And I'm trying to dive more into the miracle of life and being alive and breathing than trying to figure out where it all came from. I mean, I still think about it, but that's been kind of my grounding factor, is just being satisfied with the moment.
It sounds like you've needed to be here to relieve that existential anxiety. What has it been like with, like, you know, your family is deeply religious and deeply committed to the Christian faith in a specific form. Like, what has your relationship with your family been like since this? Have you like had these conversations with them, or?
Awesome all the way around, to be honest. I was very, very nervous about it, especially with my parents, but we got a therapist, and we did like a joint counseling session with them, where I was able to express myself and they were able to express themselves, and they accepted me with open arms. And you know, my dad, he's very I don't know, he believes that because I at one time did believe, there's not really anything I can do to change that anyway. Like I'm already good to go.
So he doesn't have existential angst around you.
Exactly.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. And I told him, I'm like, that's great. Like you can, like, that's great. I love that. Like, cool.
I think that's beautiful that they accepted you with open arms like that. And I think sitting down with a therapist together to go through this, that I haven't heard that before. That was brilliant. Kudos to you.
Yeah, it really made because I had all these things I was worried about and different reactions that could or may have happened. And I feel like just having that third party there really levels everyone, levels me too. So
yeah. What about brothers and uncles and aunts, and like, have you had conversations with them and how have they taken it?
Yeah, I think like I've had conversations with all my siblings, and they've all taken it fine. I think they're a little like less conservative, more open-minded than what we grew up in. I think that all my extended family has just heard through word of mouth. Yeah, I feel like people just, all of our friends and stuff, they just kind of, some of them I had specific conversations with, but as I wasn't going to church, or you know, that I was being invited to different churches by different people, and be like, oh, I'm not really doing that right now. Yeah, honestly, it wasn't poorly received. What I kind of wish happened more was that there's just more curiosity from Christians when a Christian leaves the faith, because even I did have a few people do the evangelical thing where, they're like, oh, you've left the faith, let me preach to you for an hour. And it's like, I've heard, I've talked about this stuff for 30 years. Like, you're not telling me anything new. You're actually like anyway. So it's just, I wish there were more curiosity around what people after they leave the faith believe. Because like I said, this is like one of the first conversations I've had.
So what's been the hardest part of like exiting the faith? What's been the most difficult in the whole process as you think about it?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing was cleaning the slate and then confronting myself, because I had lived behind this idea of God. I had all my answers worked out for me. Like I knew what my purpose in life was. And the hardest thing was embracing the unknown, but that also ended up becoming the most comforting thing. So I think what was hardest was just letting go of everything. That
interesting phrase, letting go of everything. I just interviewed an author, my friend Kevin Sweeney, and he wrote a book called The Joy of Letting Go. And he says that letting go isn't a thing you do, but I'm going to butcher how he says it because he's so beautiful in the way he says it, but it's the thing like that allows your life to flow through your hands in this moment. And there's like, then you can find joy through like not grasping hold of an expectation of what life ought to be, but you let go and then it allows life to happen and you just experience it. And kind of sounds like that's where you're at.
Yeah, no, that's exact. Like that speaks to me of mindfulness and like it is like there's a reason a lot of people don't meditate is because like when you sit down alone with your thoughts, like it's very hard to let go of your thoughts. Like and so like I said, I do think that was the hardest thing, but it also turns into the best thing.
Awesome. Well, Caleb, I appreciate your journey, your intellectual honesty with yourself, and just, I just appreciate you as a human. I think you're a great human, and appreciate you coming on and being courageous and telling your story here and letting me ask some questions and be curious myself.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah. Well, I would love to get down to Mexico to see you, but I don't think that is in my near future. So.
Oh, well, it's all right, but it's here waiting for you.
Oh, man. And if you need a place in Michigan to crash, you can put up a tent in my backyard.
Yeah, I love camping.
Sweet. All right, my friend. I don't know how to end interviews, so I just hit the stop button.
Well, thank you so much for listening to the Liminal Living Podcast, hanging out with me and Caleb as we chat just about his journey and where it's going. And that was a wild ride for me. That was a wild ride, and I learned a good amount. I appreciate that you stuck with it and got here and listened to another human story with compassion and empathy and understanding. And we got another story coming up next week. It's going to be a good one. My friend, we're either going to have my friend Lance, who's a pastor, who used to be a pastor, suffered some church abuse, or my friend Dan, who runs a retreat center in Puerto Rico. One of those is going to be next week, and I'm not sure which one yet. So we'll decide then, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Whether you're a morning person or a bedtime procrastinator, everyone deserves a mattress that works for their style. And you'll find the best mattress for you at Ashley. The new Tempur-Adapt collection at Ashley brings you one-of-a-kind body-conforming technology, making every sleep tailored to be your best. The collection also features cool-to-the-touch covers and motion absorption to help minimize sleep disruptions from partners, pets, or kids. Shop the all-new Tempur-Adapt collection at Ashley, in-store or online at ashley.com. Ashley, for the love of home.